blood. team has slain the dragon. Team's turret has been destroyed. team's turret has been destroyed. Blue team's turret has been destroyed. Red team's turret has been destroyed. Shut down.
Begin, the crew has to be ready to
0 to close visors and arm the launch escape system.
SpaceX Dragon copies stepping into Section 7. All crew visors are closed. We are arming the launch escape system.
SpaceX copies all.
That's Commander Nicole Mann reporting back and confirming. Their visors are closed. They are ready to arm the launch escape system.
and you can see the crew members pulling their straps and ensuring that they are buckled in, because from a crew perspective, that relaxation period that I talked about earlier is now over. Capture the
This is
tones.
empty on countdown 1. Launch escape system is verified armed.
All right, we got the verification of the armed escape system.
So from a training perspective, the sounds and things that the crew will hear during the loading operation are just different than they're able to capture from a training perspective. And so now's when it starts to, again, be a little bit different from a crew perspective.
There's no simulating that system.
You know, there is some acoustics that they tried to capture.
Falcon 9 tanks will be venting for the start of prop load. Expect loud venting.
That they tried to capture with the Demo 1 audio, if you will. But as you heard in the comm that just came through there, you know, you need to get reminded to expect loud venting during some of the operations. And these are new things from a crew perspective that you've been briefed on, but now you're going to hear them for the first time.
3 of the 4 crew members inside that capsule right now have never flown to space before. They are first-time flyers. The lone exception, Koichi Wakata, who was a veteran with JAXA, and he's getting ready to embark on his 5th flight to space. And as we wait for the next mark,
The crew's experience, whether it's a space shuttle or a Soyuz or the Dragon vehicle or Starliner or Artemis, as we move towards that, these experiences are all slightly different. And so I'm excited to hear, Koichi's discussion as he tries to balance and describe all three of them side by side when he gets back to moving.
I'd love to hear him talk about the comparisons. There's only a few astronauts like him, right, that have been able to fly on all three vehicles.
Yes, and as we go forward here with the Artemis missions coming forward, I'm excited to have folks compare and contrast their Orion experience, their SLS experience with the Falcon 9 or other
You
rockets.
have slain an
That's going to
enemy.
be fun.
An ally has been slain.
Just a few seconds now, and we're awaiting the confirmation to the beginning of loading propellant into the Falcon 9 rocket.
An enemy has been
Beautiful
slain.
shot there as we encircle the launch pad. Just a few more seconds until that call out.
Propellant loading has started.
An ally has been slain.
And so it begins. The loading of propellant aboard the Falcon 9 rocket, liquid oxygen and RP-1. That's the propellant and your oxidizer, which blended together make quite the combustion. Millions of pounds of thrust to get Crew 5 into space.
Now, there are a lot of details to that operation, Daryl, with each of the stages. And as you mentioned, the oxidizer and the fuel both need to be loaded. And so the crew will follow along with that carefully as the loading operation commences. If there was any reason for them to need to stop that operation, the crew would expect that propellant loading to kind of be backed out and reversed. And so they'll want to understand the state of that fueling operation going forward, just in case they had to back out of it.
And we got a social question now from Pat Grant, B117, who asks, how long does it take to complete the fueling operations?
It's a great question, Daryl, and they started it at 35 minutes because that's really hard to lift off because that's how long it takes for the loading operations to kind of get executed. The crew goes through the process, the ground team of loading that propellant, ensuring that they get the proper commodities on board. The actual sequencing of things might be affected a little bit by the temperature on a given day, but they have that process well monitored, and they begin at 35 minutes because that's how long it takes to get this rocket all filled up.
Thank you for answering those questions, and to you out there for asking the questions. Keep them coming. Hashtag AskNASA on our various social platforms. And again, now that fueling for Falcon 9 has started, that means the 8 Super Draco engines inside Crew Dragon are ready, if needed, to launch the capsule away from Falcon 9 in an instant. Should there be any kind of emergency associated with the rocket or the pad. The NASA and SpaceX teams have trained extensively for exactly that type of contingency. And so now let's go over to Kate Tice at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne.
An ally has been
Operations
slain.
update. Kate.
Thanks, Daryl. You can probably tell by the background noise that things are starting to get more exciting now that we're just practically 30 minutes away from launch of Crew 5, certainly counting down the final minutes. Everything's still looking good for Falcon 9 and Dragon. With that launch escape system now armed, we are heading for an on-time launch just 32 minutes from now. As you saw, Falcon 9 propellant load began right on time at T-minus 35 minutes. The first and second stages of Falcon 9 are each loaded with 2 liquid propellants. One is fuel, which is loaded into a tank at the bottom of each stage. The other is an oxidizer, and that's loaded into a tank at the top of each stage. The fuel that we use to power the Merlin engines is a refined kerosene, referred to as RP-1 or Rocket Propellant 1. The oxidizer loaded on each stage is a densified liquid oxygen, or LOX. Densified means that it's kept much colder than typical for a launch vehicle, and it takes up less volume. And as such, this allows for more oxidizer to be loaded into the first and second stages. Now, to ignite the fuel and oxidizer in the Merlin rocket engine, we use an ignition fluid called TTEP. When TTEP comes into contact with oxygen, it burns, giving off a green-colored flame. Once we have that flame going, we add in the kerosene fuel to the Merlin chamber, and the engine ramps up to full power. You might actually be able to see that green flash just as the second stage engine ignites following stage separation, which is expected to happen about 2 minutes and 48 seconds into flight. Right now, we're topping off helium into pressure vessels on both stages. This is used to pressurize tanks in flight as propellant is pulled out of those tanks by the Merlin turbopumps. Now, on board the spacecraft, the astronauts are monitoring systems from their crew monitors.
Loading has started.
All right, there we just heard that the cryo-helium load has begun. Again, that is going into those pressure vessels that I mentioned earlier. Now, the crew training simulator has included playback of the sounds that were recorded in a previous Dragon capsule during recent flights. So all of the pops and the hisses that the vehicle puts out, all the crew has heard those before, though not live. So they are prepared for all the noises, the extra noises that they're now hearing. As for the range, it continues to report no problems. They are go to support launch. Weather also clearly looking great. I think we're actually seeing even fewer clouds than we were about 20 minutes ago. We had a less than 10% chance or probability of violation of our weather constraints, also known as a POV. So that's really good. That is for the launch site conditions. We are also tracking downrange weather conditions as well as launch sites around the world in the unlikely event that Dragon needs to escape. Now, as a reminder, today we have an instantaneous launch time because we're heading to the International Space Station. So at this point in time, if we hear a hold for any reason, we will have to stand down and target our backup launch opportunity, which is tomorrow, just under 24 hours from today's planned launch. At this point in time, at just under T-minus 30 minutes till launch, let's turn it back over to Jesse and Sandra for an overview of what's to come until liftoff.
Great. Thanks, Kate. Always great to hear that we've got good weather and it looks beautiful over there at KSC. For Crew 5, the astronauts' flight to station will take about 29 hours.
And as we await T0 in just about 28 minutes from now, the ground operations team is doing a series of system checks to make sure both Dragon and Falcon 9 are ready for launch. You're looking at a live view of our teams at the Cape as they prepare for liftoff. And as we wait for the launch clock to hit 0, we want to give you an overview of what the ascent portion of the mission will look like.
Now, once we hit T0 and a successful launch occurs, we will watch Falcon 9 and Dragon lift off from historic launch pad 39A and make their ascent.
One would not have been possible along with two of her other
Configured for launch, this setup gives the crew insight into how the launch is.
They arrive on space station. They've got plenty of consumables, so it should be fun to have some time in space.
We're going to...
And a special thanks on behalf of all the crew to our family and friends. It is
Has started.
An RP-1 now on board Falcon 9. It is fully loaded and ready for launch.
And coming up at T-minus 1 minute, we'll hear that Dragon is in countdown. Its flight computer will switch to countdown mode, and we'll hear that the flight termination system on Falcon 9 is armed.
STS is armed. Falcon 9 is in startup and is now controlling.
And there you heard it,
Dragon is in countdown.
Dragon's flight computer in countdown. The flight termination system now armed.
We get the final go for launch from SpaceX launch director Mark
Dragon,
Surtees.
SpaceX. Godspeed. Go for launch.
SpaceX Dragon, due for launch.
SpaceX
T-minus
reports
30
go.
seconds.
Crew reports go. 30 seconds until liftoff.
T-minus 15. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
heard that the vehicle is now traveling faster than the speed of sound. Once through max Q, we'll throttle those Merlin engines back up.
Max Q. Stage 1 throttle up. Stage 1 throttle.
Stage 1 Bravo.
Shut down.
Copy 1 Bravo.
That call out for 1 Bravo means we're in the second and final abort mode for the first stage, continuing to get good performance. The crew is already pulling over 2 Gs. And next up is going to be a couple of events in rapid succession. First will be engine chill on the second stage and that engine. And there you heard that call out. And then we'll have MECO, or main engine cutoff, where the 9 engines igniting will cut off in preparation for second stage separation.
Has been destroyed.
Then we'll see the single Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage ignite and continue to carry the Crew 5 astronauts to orbit.
Just like we did on first stage, that MVAC chill is intended to help pre-chill the hardware prior to the full flow of that densified liquid oxygen.
Ally has been slain.
Stage 1 throttle down.
At this point in time, those 9 Merlin engines are beginning to throttle down in preparation for MECO, or main engine cutoff.
Your team has destroyed a turret.
Standing by for MECO.
And MECO.
Stage 2 Alpha.
And MECO. Stage separation confirmed. Copy 2 Alpha.
There we should see that second engine begin to ignite now. And obviously confirmed by the loud cheer behind us here at
Enemy has been slain.
And we're also in 2 Alpha for the aborts if needed. Again, second stage is lit and continues to carry the Crew 5 astronauts into orbit.
Enemy has been slain.
We're now getting a view of the first stage after that stage separation. The second stage still being illuminated by that single Merlin vacuum engine, and that's on the right-hand side of your screen. First stage on the left-hand side of your screen, making its way back to Earth. We will be attempting to land it on our drone ship, which today we are using just read the instructions.
Acquisition signal. Bermuda.
And we did hear that acquisition of the ground station in Bermuda. The first stage is continuing to make its way back to Earth, and the second stage is going to continue.
Trajectory nominal.
Another good call, trajectory nominal.
Directing copy.
Confirmation there from Commander Nicole Mann. You can also sort of see the Space Coast there in the background of the first stage on the left-hand side of your screen. It also looks like you can actually see the thrust plume created by the first stage as it's now rotating just out of screen.
Second stage is going to continue firing until a little over 8 minutes into the flight, really doing the heavy lifting now, getting the crew into orbit.
Everything continues to look nominal on both first and second stages. As I mentioned before, the first stage will be making a landing on one of our drone ships, which is currently parked a couple hundred miles off the coast of Florida in the Atlantic Ocean. So we can see now that
Dragon SpaceX. Trajectory nominal.
good confirmation there that we have good trajectory.
Your team has destroyed a turret.
The second stage now traveling over 5,400 miles per hour. Crew is pulling a little more than 1 G right now. That's going to continue to ramp up, peaking just before we get to second stage cutoff here in just a few minutes from now.
Slain. An ally has been slain.
First stage will be performing 2 separate burns, a re-entry burn where we reignite 3 of the Merlin the Merlin M1D engines on the first stage. We ignite the center engine into radial engines to help slow it down as it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere. And then the second final burn, and that will be the landing burn on our drone ship.
And the single MVAC engine that you see.
Trajectory nominal.
The single MVAC engine that you see. see on the right of your screen is continuing to fire. We did hear another call out. The trajectory is nominal. Crew heading in the direction that they are supposed to be. This single engine can produce over 220,000 pounds of thrust in the vacuum of space. Now over 200 kilometers in altitude. We will start to hit events now in a rapid succession as the first stage continues to make its way back to Earth and the second stage continues its burn. Just a couple minutes left in that burn.
For those of you just joining us, just over 6.5 minutes ago, our 4 Crew 5 astronauts launched from Kennedy Space Center in Florida, and they are now making their way into orbit on the second stage inside Crew Dragon. Which we're hearing that the trajectory on that is phenomenal. They are safe inside Dragon Endurance, where the first stage on the left-hand side of your screen is making its way back to Earth. We are coming up to the re-entry burn, which, as I said before, we ignite 3 of the 9 Merlin engines to help slow the booster down as it re-enters the dense part of the Earth's atmosphere. As the entry burn completes, we'll be in the final
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
So there we heard the call out. You can there see it on your screen that entry burn has been initiated.
In the final different abort phases here shortly, which essentially correspond to areas along the very northeastern seaboard of the U.S.
Stage 1 entry burn shut down.
Great news that entry burn was shut down, and then those last all the way across the Atlantic off the coast of Scotland for those abort zones.
An ally has been slain. Rampage.
Everything continues to look nominal for both the first and second stages.
And the crew with the second stage still attached is now traveling over 13,000 miles per hour.
We're about 10 seconds away from Seco 1.
Copy, Shannon.
Shannon,
Stage 1 transonic.
that call out for Shannon, Ireland, indicative of our final abort zone. After this, we'll see second stage shut off, and we'll be listening for confirmation of a good orbit, which tells us the crew and Dragon are exactly where they need to be.
There we had confirmation that the MVAC has shut down simultaneously.
And you heard that call for a good insertion. We will coast for a few minutes.
There we can see the drone ship coming into view as Falcon 9 attempts.
Stage 1 landing leg deployed.
See those landing legs have now deployed.
Separation will be coming up just a couple of minutes now. We do coast for a few minutes after second engine cutoff to allow any rates or motion to dampen out and settle. And looks like we're going to get a view of the second stage as it separates here shortly. We did hear that the crew has been successfully inserted into a good orbit.
Has been slain. Unstoppable.
Again, the crew is still attached to the second stage.
An enemy has been slain.
We are expecting stage separation to occur in just over a minute from now, about 1 minute and 8 seconds. That's when the second stage will separate from the Dragon trunk. The Dragon trunk is the part of hardware where we are able to house the cargo that is able to be exposed to the vacuum of space, as well as the solar panels which help power Dragon while it is on orbit. Again, that stage separation is now coming up in about 30 seconds. After stage separation, we will have nose cone deployment. Now that Dragon is in the vacuum of space, we will be able to open the nose cone and expose that forward hatch, which is what is utilized to dock autonomously with the International Space Station.
And that nose cone does say for second stage separation. And there is separation.
Dragon separation confirmed. Dragon, is your instructor?
Dragon copy then.
Dragon, this is your launch director on Dragon. On behalf of the entire launch and recovery team, it was an honor, a pleasure to be a part of this mission with you.
The enemy's
And while
inhibitor is
October 3rd
respawning
may
soon.
belong to the main girls, October 5th will forever belong to Crew 5. Godspeed, Endurance. Cheers.
Awesome. Thank you so much, the Falcon team. That was a smooth ride up here. We got 3 rookies that are pretty happy to be floating in space right now, and 1 veteran astronaut who's pretty happy to be back as well. Let's see what you got to say, Koichi.
Falcon team, it was a smooth ride, and I see all the 3 heavy faces here. It's back in zero G, and I appreciate all the help to give us a smooth ride and training. And thank you so much. ジャクタの支援隊の皆さん、非常にスムーズな打ち上げでした。打ち上げご支援していただいた皆さん、応援に駆けつけてくださった皆さん、ありがとうございました。この調子でチームワークを持って頑張ります。Thank you for your support. Anya.
Thank you, Falcon 9 and fellow agencies, NASA and JAXA and C6 exactly for giving us this opportunity. We so glad to do it together. And thank you for everybody, for all people who is up. Спасибо большое всем агентам Роскосмос, НАСА, JAXA и, естественно, SpaceX за предоставленную нам возможность. Мы рады всем экипажам сделать то, что мы сейчас делаем. И большое спасибо всем людям, кто сейчас с нами.
Really nice words there from Crew 5 crew, as well as
Dragon sometimes he makes the words. Had a great ride. Have a good mission. We'll see you later.
wonderful Mean Girls reference there by launch director Mark Soltis, and then we just heard from Chief Engineer Dan Alex. And we just heard our first Quindar tone, indicating the crew.
Nominal humidifier activation and service section regular checkouts. Expected launch the signal, New Hampshire.
Dragon copy.
And Kate, it did look like we were getting our first views of that microgravity indicator.
I did see that as well.
And we're getting views now of the crew on orbit, 3 of them for the first time ever. We saw some cheers, some high fives. Looks like they're feeling great.
Hopefully we can see that zero-G indicator float back into view and hopefully get a better shot of it. I couldn't quite tell what it was, although it kind of looked like it may have been an Einstein doll. But that's just kind of what it looked like from the backside.
I think you're right, Kate. It looked like a baby Einstein to me. So the next milestone that we're looking ahead towards is the nose cone opening.
If you've just joined us, we had a successful liftoff exactly 16 minutes ago of the Crew 5 mission. They had an on-time liftoff from Kennedy Space Center at noon Eastern Time. They had a smooth ride up to orbit. The first stage landed successfully on our drone ship. Just read the instructions, and everything has been looking good so far. We are hoping to get another view on board Dragon once we're able to get that camera back. But so far, everything leading up to this point in time, we got a shot there of the MVAC engine, which is no longer firing. It is coasting with that attached to the second stage, which has been separated from Dragon. So everything was super smooth this morning, starting all the way back. I think we got here around T-minus 4 hours, and super smooth countdown. Beautiful day from Kennedy Space Center. It looked like now that the Dragon spacecraft is in space, we are able to
Expected loss of signal, keep inland.
we are able to open up that nose cone and expose the forward. We keep that nose cone closed during launch preparations and during the ascent portion. So as you can saw there momentarily, Dragon is in space, and the crew 5 astronauts, all 4 of them, another view of that zero-G indicator once we're able to bring onboard cabin views back to you of the Crew 5 crew. We always like to see what the zero-G gravity indicator is. As you saw earlier in the webcast, Bob actually brought the zero-G indicator that he does use on the Demo 2 mission, a lovely sequin dinosaur, which I also have one at my desk. Not the Bob obviously has the one that went to space. Mine is a replica, but we love seeing these zero-G indicators. It's